So I wanted to talk about this question of what would it take to make you change your mind about whether God exists. There have been a lot of responses to this question been floating around for a while. And I know there's a kind of common answer, well, maybe if you had a personal revelation, or maybe if you actually personally witnessed a miracle, both of which I think are kind of unsatisfactory. But what I would kind of like to do is to reverse this question and pose it to believers, because the way it's generally phrased and the way sometimes atheists respond to it is like this. Well, suppose I was actually walking down the street in my general atheist sort of way, and suddenly the clouds were to part and Jesus were to step down in a great beam of light. And of course I would no doubt know that it was Jesus because of all of the pictures of Jesus that I've seen, and so I would recognize him because of course everyone who drew those pictures knew what he looked like because of the detailed descriptions they gave of him in the New Testament. Anyway, beside the point, presumably we would all know that it was him, and then we would know that this is the second coming of Jesus because obviously he came once before. And on that basis, because we saw him descend from the clouds, we would know, second coming of Jesus. Now all of my silly atheist ways are past, and now I believe. That would presumably be the scenario under which I would now accept, as I would witness this miracle. And so what I was wondering, and the question that I would pose to people who believe that this scenario is something that might actually happen. Suppose a believing Christian, for instance, were walking down the same street, possibly on the other side of the street from me, and the same clouds were to part, only instead of Jesus stepping out, a vast rainbow bridge were to reach down, and the great Norse gods were to step out. It's Thor and it's Odin. It's Thor with his mighty hammer, and it's Baldur, and a great vast flight of Valkyries were to come out of the heaven. And suddenly Yggdrasil, the serpent who clutches its tail in its teeth, the world-spanning serpent, were to suddenly become visible. And all of a sudden, my gosh, it's not Armageddon after all, it's Ragnarok, and the great war between the gods of Asgard and the frost giants has now commenced, and you can watch it on CNN, and even Fox News has to grudgingly acknowledge that in fact this is happening, and it's now 24-hour coverage in all the news, this vast world-spanning battle involving the Norse gods and the frost giants. Okay, do you now throw your crosses and your Bibles in the trash and grab up your swords and enter into the combat? Because, as you all no doubt know, the only way that you can get into the Norse version of heaven is to die in combat with a sword in your hand. Do you now alter your beliefs in response to the evidence of your senses, as you would somehow expect me to do? What's your response to what you have just seen? Or do you say, well, what would your response be? Would you say, well, no, this has got to be some kind of trick. Maybe it's Satan is disguising himself as what? As the Norse gods and the frost giants, and this is all just some kind of trick? Because certainly you can look from one end of Revelation to the other. There's nothing about any frost giants. Yeah, you can find something about Satan as a trickster, but this would be one heck of a weird trick. But I suspect that that's very much what you would say. That is, that no matter what the evidence is, you would have to say, I'm not buying into this whole Norse Odin thing. I'm not going there. Not buying it. And I have to tell you something. I don't care what I was seeing on CNN. I don't care what I was seeing on MSNBC. No matter what, I would find the whole Norse frost giant Valkyrie thing to be very fishy. I would have a very great deal of trouble buying into it, even if everyone around me was seeing it, even if it was on TV, even if I was seeing Thor tramping across the landscape. That's because all of these mythologies, I mean, you see them actually walking across the landscape, you might have a difficulty calling them mythology, but all of these theologies are rooted in larger cosmologies. They are rooted in an idea about the nature of the universe that we know aren't true. The Norse gods and the frost giants and all the rest of them don't simply exist as beings. They exist as part of an idea about the nature of the universe, about the way in which the universe came into being, accounts for their presence in the cosmos. And we know that creation story, the creation story of which the Norse gods were a part, the cosmology that accounts for their existence, isn't true and couldn't possibly be true. For the Norse gods to exist, every single thing that we know about the universe would have to be wrong.